Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. My name is Link, and today I'm joined by Sandy Gordon, artist at Yacht Club Games, contributor to Shovel Knight, Rivals of Ether, his own pixel art and animation tutorials, and other game jams. Hi, Sandy, how are you doing today?
Hey, Link. I'm doing well. It's great to be here. Thank you. Appreciate you asking me to be on.
Oh no, thank you so much for agreeing to join. Super glad to have you on. A big fan of Shovel Knight series. So it to me it makes great sense to try and talk to someone that was part of a game series that I think the best way to put it made me feel like a child again while playing like Super Mario Brothers 3. Like that's the whole aspect of Shovel Knights made me feel that way. So, it's a big honor to have you on. So thank you so much.
Yeah, appreciate that. It's an honor to hear such glowing praise.
Yeah, no worries. So, Sandy, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for those that might not know who you are?
Sure. Well, I have been doing pixel art and animation for, like, specifically pixel art for about 7 or so years now. I started working at Yacht Club Games about 4.5 years ago. So I was hired at the tail end of Spectre of Torment, right as we were working on King of Cards and Shovel Knight Showdown. So I got on board there, and we've been working on a whole lot of projects since. So, those two games released in December 2019, and then we started working on some other internal secret projects that I can't really talk about yet, unfortunately. We've also been publishing a handful of titles and co-developing a handful of titles, including Cyber Shadow and Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon and Shovel Knight Dig, which you can look forward to. Hopefully, well, Pocket Dungeon later this year. Cyber Shadow came out in January of this year, 2021, and Shovel Knight Dig hopefully next year. Before that, I was working on some independent games, independent projects. Nothing I want to like shill right now, just because it's things that I've kind of put in the past. But yeah, have I definitely just kind of fell into doing pixel art. I never had any intentions of working on indie games or even doing animation at all. And I just picked it up one day, and it's kind of been just a very interesting and but loving relationship since. I've enjoyed doing it day to day, and I guess it's just kind of uh, kept me afloat, kept me working. Luckily.
Well, that's great to hear, and I kind of like the aspect of just sort of falling into it. Because for me, I'm not really an artistic person, so I have a lot of uh, awe, I guess is the right word, and respect for those that are into the whole art side of things.
Hmm.
So, it's really interesting that you just sort of fell into it, which is great to hear, and I'm glad that it's working out for you.
Yeah, so far so good. I definitely can't complain, and I love what I do. So yeah, not too many people can say that. So I feel very lucky.
Yeah, and fingers crossed that it remains that way for you. And I don't mean that in any weird way. Just
No,
hopefully,
yeah. I
hopefully it
mean,
stays going well for you.
yeah, I say the same thing. My
So,
fingers are always crossed. I mean, the game industry in and of itself is always, just like kind of a rocky thing to navigate. Especially when you have like a new game on the horizon with, new IP or something that you're trying to market from scratch to, hopefully, in the case of like Yacht Club, we've got, a bit of an audience already established. But it's always scary to be making something new because you don't know what the reception is going to be like. So fingers are always crossed, no matter what. You never know what can happen.
definitely, that's a good approach, I think, in a lot of ways. Now, you said you kind of fell into it. Do you mind going in a little more into how you got into doing pixel art?
Oh, sure. I wouldn't say it's an exciting story per se, but I went to school. Initially, I went to college for 3D art and animation. But that's a very loose description of what my program actually was. In high school, I started in 3D, and my high school had kind of like an imaging lab sort of area. So we had like some high end computers, at least high end at the time. This was like early 2000s. And so I was in there all the time, and I was like, oh yeah, working on games would be super cool. I've always liked games, but I didn't, have any sense for what an avenue to getting into the industry was, or like how to do that. So when I got into college, it was a local program at a local school, Champlain College, and I was one of the first. It was the first time that that college had a game related program, so I was one of the first students to take it on. And actually now, I mean, since then it's really grown, and now I think it's fairly well developed. I know there are a lot of students currently working in the industry that went through that program, but at the time it was just really in its infancy, and honestly not super great back then. I'm sure now it's great. um, so I worked through the program for about 3 years, and I guess I wasn't floundering academically, but I was like floundering internally because I didn't know that 3D was what I wanted to do. It didn't really click with me. I would do the assignments, or whatever it was, but I never felt like uh I was getting a whole lot of like creative, um what's the word, fulfillment out of it per se. Um I ended up getting a scholarship to go to GDC. I think back then, maybe they still have it, but GDC had a scholarship. Uh, I'm blanking on the name, but they basically gave me a free trip out there to San Francisco, and I got to like hang with the developer buddy they hooked me up with, which was really cool. And while I was there, I met a few people in the industry, and a few other students, and kind of it broadened my horizon as to what being like working in games actually meant. It kind of told me that it doesn't have to mean making 3D models, or if you want to go into the art side of things, making 3D models or animating them. There's also concept art as an avenue. There's also game design and whatnot. There's also 3D environmental art is different than character art, and like those are very specialized skills. Just all kinds of different things. And so it made me stop and think that, hey, maybe I don't have to do what my program was telling me I needed to do, and learn what they were telling me I needed to learn. So I kind of had a bit of an existential moment, and I ended up leaving the program after 3 years. And I finished up my degree in fine arts, at another local school, and I lived in Japan for a year. I studied abroad, because I'd always wanted to do that. Um, so it just kind of shook things up a little bit. It made me realize that I wanted to do 2D art instead of 3D art. But unfortunately, I through that process, I kind of realized that I wasn't good enough at 2D art to actually like get in the industry doing it, like becoming a concept artist or whatever it was. Um, and so I guess as a result, it threw me for a loop, and I didn't do anything with games or game related, for a handful of years. I ended up becoming a graphic designer at a company, a marketing company, for like 2 to 3 years, and then did freelance for another year. And sorry if this story is going long, but I'm sort of getting to the point, I guess.
No worries.
So after doing graphic design, and also realizing that wasn't, really a passion of mine, it was just kind of paying the bills. I ended up actually getting let go from the job because the company I was with was like downsizing, because they weren't doing super well. And my girlfriend, now wife, but girlfriend at the time, she was teaching English in Japan, and she invited me to go out there and live with her, and I did, and I was there for about 3 months. And while I was there, I was watching Twitch and I saw an indie game dev stream on Twitch. And I was like, what in the world is this? Like an independent developer. I didn't even know that was a thing. And it was just a guy, streaming him coding a game using Game Maker Studio. And I was like, whoa, this is awesome. You can do this from your room. Like, you don't have to work at a giant AAA studio. I had no clue. And the game he was coding was called Nuclear Throne, which has been out for years by this point. But I just got really inspired seeing him. It was his name's JW. Uh, the team is Vlambeer, and he was working with Paul Veer and Justin Chan. And they were doing the art for the game, and it just really struck me as incredibly charming, but also accessible. Like something that you could make with, the art's amazing in that game. I'm not like knocking the art at all, but it looked like something that not anyone could do, but anyone with a creative spark and drive and some, fundamental art knowledge could at least pick up and like try and make something of similar scope, is what I'm trying to say. The scope looked attainable. And so I started making sprites and I started doing pixels and I got my first pixel program, which was graphic scale, because that's what Paul Veer was using at the time. And I just started making, sprites that looked kind of like the sprites in Nuclear Throne. And then from there, it kind of evolved to, me finding other types of pixel art and gravitating toward different styles that I might have been more interested in or just found interesting at the time, and kind of working my way through there. Yeah, I mean, there's more to it. Obviously, there's years and years, but that's kind of the process of where I started into how I got into pixel art, and as I said, just fell into it more or less.
And that's like a really thank you for sharing that, by the way. And that's a really interesting story. And as someone else or as someone that has a graphic design degree, um, the fact that you were able to bounce back after not maybe enjoying it that much is fantastic to hear. It's for me it was very soul sucking for
Yeah.
a multitude of different reasons. So it's great that that didn't defeat you uh, while working in a way that wasn't, might I kind of assume, incredibly fulfilling.
Yeah, graphic design's definitely. I mean, I can understand why people would have a passion for it, as some people do, and I don't hate the process. To be honest, I think I learned a lot of valuable things during my time with graphic design that carried over into what I'm doing now. And not only, helping with pixel art and animation in the sense that, I have a foundation for proportion and color theory and, you know, um, just size and shape and relative space, composition, all that, sort of fundamental knowledge. But also, when you're working at an indie studio, there's a lot of back end stuff that most people kind of overlook until you're in it and having to do it, which is creating banners and graphics and illustrations and all sorts of things that you need to market and promote your game, right? Stuff that people take for granted that they don't really stop to think that, well, hey, if you've got a game, how are you going to get people to see it? You need a website, you need like a Twitter account that has banners that say, hey, game coming out such and such a date, or the game's on sale, and someone has to make those. So having all that knowledge going into a small studio just makes you more versatile and valuable in the end.
And that's also a really good approach or thing to keep in mind is that, the more, as you said, like the more valuable as an employee you can be, it always is just, it's never a bad thing. And now I say that with a bit of hesitancy only because, and this isn't the case of, what I'm implying for you guys. Uh, but there's always a bit of hesitancy in saying that only because, you could find yourself doing the work of, 5, 10 or whatever people.
Right, right.
um it doesn't sound like it's what's happening for you. Hopefully not. um but yeah, so it's that's great to hear that that was able to provide a lot of valuable experience for you moving forward that's still applicable for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think that honestly, you know, while I was in it, the road I was taking felt, um, I, I guess, a bit defeating, and you couldn't really see, I guess, too far ahead, just because when you're looking for work, you're not sure what your passion is, or um, you have kind of an idealized version of what you'd like to do, but you don't really know how to get there. It's hard to stay motivated and stay optimistic. But I think looking back now, everything that I had to do to get to where I am kind of made me able to do what I do. Um, so I definitely don't take any of it for granted, I guess I would say.
And that's great to hear because, oftentimes you find yourself looking back at certain things, and you feel that it was pointless or it didn't add anything.
Right.
So it's good that that's a positive experience overall for you. Now, based on your experiences, is there any advice you could maybe give to those looking to get into the industry?
In what sense? Like in terms of getting a job at a company or making your own game?
That's a very good question. I think I was meaning more in the sense of, based on your experiences, if someone was looking to get into to just learning how to do pixel art or what have you, if there was anything you could say that might steer someone in the right direction.
Okay. If someone listening to this is an independent developer or is an individual looking to start making a game or start, put together a team and work on something together, I would, I think my advice would be to make sure to keep scope small, especially for your first game. I know it can be really easy to kind of get uh, wrapped up in big creative ideas or big grand designs for MMOs or RPGs or anything that's just super expansive. It can really snowball very quickly and get away from you, and you might quickly get discouraged. So in order to keep the momentum going and also finish something, which is honestly finishing a game is the hardest part. Like if you can finish a small game, then you're a million steps ahead of most people who try and get into um, game development. So keep the scope small and work broad strokes, meaning try and map out what the game is supposed to be and feel like by the end, early on, but in a very like bare bones kind of way, like set the blueprint out so you know where you're headed, as opposed to making polished art and focusing, spending weeks and weeks on a specific like a single mechanic and trying to make that perfect without actually understanding what the game's going to actually play like or feel like in a level. It's like actually stamp things out as generally and broadly as you can and kind of work inward, and refine things kind of while looking at the bigger picture of where you're heading. um, as far as trying to get a job at a company, um, I would say that much like I fell into pixel art, um, kind of through happenstance, uh, I guess don't box yourself into thinking that you need to be good at a specific type of um, a specific skill, I guess. Just the game industry is so young right now, even still. I mean, it might not seem like it, but it's only a few decades old, which really isn't that much in the grand scheme of things. So there are constantly new job descriptions and job titles being made all the time. You can work in video games doing art and designing code, sure, but there's also marketing and social media and uh, videographers and filmographers and just all kinds of avenues that you can uh, just kind of mold to make yourself useful and valuable to a company. So I guess take whatever you're most passionate about and find a way to make yourself valuable and unique and interesting to a company. I guess that's not that's kind of a general response. I'm not going to say like go out and get this program and work this many hours a day, and that's um, because everyone knows that kind of stuff. But other than just saying practice, practice, right? like I'm I think more useful information is that passion kind of leads to opportunity.
And thank you so much for sharing that advice. And that makes sense, because if I might kind of co-opt it or what have you, if you don't have the passion to do something or to keep chasing something, you can only get so far without having your whole heart behind it, as whatever you want, as cheeky or whatever as that might sound like saying, but you got to have your heart behind it. You got to want it. You got to kind of want to do that. So that makes sense, to have the passion and to keep the passion and to progress forward with that in mind. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah, no, you paraphrased it well.
So Sandy, I do have a question. I want to kind of go back a little further
hmm
with you. So what was your favorite game as a child, and what was it about that game that kind of made you, keep it in such high regards?
Oh man, that is actually an easy question for me to answer. Uh, and the game that I was completely obsessed with as a kid was Suikoden 1 and 2. It's a series of RPGs, JRPGs, but specifically Suikoden 1 and 2. Yeah, I remember going to a Toys R Us with a friend when I was maybe 9 or 10, I think it was. I'd have to double check the dates. That's just kind of like a general sense of when I feel like it was. But yeah, we went to Toys R Us and there was a bargain bin of PlayStation games, just like, crappy ones that had been tossed away or didn't sell well or whatever. And I remember we each chose a game, and my friend chose a game called Punky Skunk, which I've never seen anyone talk about ever again since that day. I don't even know if it was a real game. Maybe I just dreamt it, but I'm pretty sure it was called Punky Skunk. It was like a Sonic clone. And I chose Suikoden, which had a really lame, clearly Americanized cover art. It was like, that classic situation of like Japanese cover art for a game being really beautiful and like you know ornately illustrated image, and then they bring it to the West and they have some like generic looking dude with huge Conan muscles and a big sword, and it's like, what does this have to do with the game? uh
Yes, yes.
classic. Yeah.
I just looked it up online. Yes, I 100% know what you're getting at, I think.
Yeah, so to this day I don't know what the Western cover art has to do with the game, but there it is. So yeah, I picked it up and that game just blew me away. It was my first RPG, and I remember I for a long time, like for a couple of years, I didn't really get that far because I wouldn't save often enough. Either that or I didn't have a memory card for my PlayStation 1 because I never played games that really required that much saving. Like, cuz like I said, that was my first RPG, and the other games I played were like fighting games or something, which it's like, other than maybe I used the cheat code to unlock all the characters. So I never really had to worry about using memory cards. But anyway, yeah, that game just really blew me away. It has 108 characters you can collect and add to your party, and it was just so cool. I don't know if you've ever played it, Link.
It's it's one of those game series that's been on my list to get to, but as you said, like there's 108 characters, and it's seems like a very expansive game, which I think is fantastic that that was your first foray into JRPGs, really.
Yeah, I got
Um,
lucky.
because it's not such a high pedigree for like I've never heard anything really bad about it. I've met several people in life that have had great stories to share about it and everything, but in my case I haven't really tried it, only because it seems like such a daunting series to get into, and that's totally on me, but you know
It's funny because it would seem like it's daunting because of the number of characters, but it's actually not that long of a game. I mean, at least relative to other JRPGs, it's not like as long as a Final Fantasy, where you're putting in 100 plus hours. Certainly not a Dragon Quest or anything like that. I would highly recommend it. It really holds up today, even. And if you're gonna play If you were going to play both of them, I would recommend going in order. But if you're only going to play one, Suikoden 2, I think, is the stronger title, and it's not really directly related to the story of the first one. It is in little ways, but yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I'll definitely keep that in mind, especially because I've never actually looked into the time to beat or what have you. But hearing that it might not be as much of an investment as I thought, that makes it much more appealing, especially in today's world where you're inundated with so many different great games to play and trying to budget everything out.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. No, if you're ever looking for like a classic, retro gaming experience, I highly recommend it.
Thank you for that recommendation. I am going to take a look at it now that like I said, that I know it's not as long as I thought. So Sandy, what is it about gaming that, that makes it enjoyable to you? And how is it that you enjoy it now?
Um, that's a tricky one. My answer would be varied depending on the game, I'm sure, or depending on what game I'm into at the time. Certainly fun mechanics are going to pull me in, right? But I think that what keeps me interested is generally strong world building, and strong character building. And I guess Suikoden is actually a perfect example, just because the mechanics, as far as RPGs go, are really not as obtuse as a lot of other titles. Um, it's a straightforward, you know, build your party up, level their stats. The stats auto level. You don't even have to, allocate stat points to anything. You just use the character and they get better, which I thought was really cool. They do have weapons, I think, that you can change in and out, but from what I recall, it's nothing. It's like very straightforward. Um, but what's cool about it is, rather than having to like min max all of the stats for the characters, you just kind of focus on building your party based on their affinities. So like uh, the battle system has it has close range, medium range, and long range characters, or spaces for those characters, and each character has an affinity for a specific range. So you can put like a character who's good at close range in the back of the party line, but they just won't do as much damage. So it was just kind of like a very simplistic, um, like way of thinking about your party. It didn't require too much like brain power, which for me, I guess, is kind of more how I prefer to play games. Just thinking about the cool world that I'm in and which characters are like I like the most and I want to have in my party, rather than being like, oh, fine, I have to use, this character that I hate because you know, they're OP in this situation or in the game. Like I remember some of the Final Fantasies, I would have to use certain characters just because they're the only magic user, right? Or so like I have to have them in my party against certain bosses or whatever. But Suikoden, it allows you to focus on the story and your party, just from a standpoint of like, this character is a really cool elf that shoots a bow and I just happen to like that, so I want them in my party. Or this character is a raccoon squirrel who has a cape on and it's adorable and he needs to be in my party. So for me, that's what sucked me into a game like that, especially growing up.
And that's great to hear, because it's like what people like about games always varies so much. And hearing what everyone likes is always great, especially when they kind of get into some of the nitty gritty of it, similar to what you just said about the. I'm going to assume it's a tanuki, the raccoon or a raccoon dog, um, that joins your party that wears a cape, and that's seems fantastic and wonderful just to be able to have a fond memory of that, especially when you can just like the character and use the character without, as you said, having to worry about trying to balance too much, having a close range in the front, a long range in the back, and what have you, but not feeling pressured to min max what the best team is going to be because it's the team that kind of is the most viable, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah, exactly. It keeps the mechanics simple and allows you to kind of put your focus on uh other more, to me at least, enjoyable aspects of a game like that. And I'll add too. I mean, not to just keep harping on Suikoden, but other games too. Like I'm a huge Souls game fan. I've been playing Souls games since Demon Souls released on PS3, and I've been excited about every one since then. And what's funny about those games to me is I mean, obviously the mechanics are great, the gameplay is great. It's divisive for sure, but I always enjoy it. But I think what makes me want to push through the struggle of learning the boss fights and the combat and just get over the difficulty curve or the challenge at least of it is the world and wanting to see more of it and wanting to meet more characters and NPCs and wanting to find more gear because the gear is so cool I have no idea what could be around this next corner or behind this secret wall. Um, so for me, it's just the world building, the character building, the exploration more than the mechanics. Which, like I said, a game has to be fun for to pull me in. But what keeps me there is really just the rest of it, I would say.
And yeah, definitely. Again, that makes perfect sense as well because having a compelling world uh, can make up for a lot of other things. The gameplay might not be perfectly polished. That I'm not going to say that's the case with the Souls like games because from what I've played of them, they are quite polished.
For sure.
But having like a compelling world that makes you want to keep learning, makes you want to keep exploring and what have you, that's a fantastic thing. And I think that's, the immersion of it. That was the word I was going for.
Right.
Having games that are immersive are always just fantastic to be able to sit down and be a part of without having to worry so much about everything else.
Yeah, no, that's a succinct way of putting it. A game that's immersive or has a world that's immersive. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Sandy, I don't want to take up too much more of your time just because, busy days and busy lives and all of that, especially as you alluded to earlier, working on different projects that are yet to be announced,
Hmm.
which I look forward to from you guys at Yacht Club because, everything I've seen from Yacht Club has been fun. I'm, a huge fan of the Shovel Knight series. So, gonna don't want to take too much more of your time when you have all that stuff to worry about. So I'm just gonna ask you a few more questions and then let you get on your way, okay?
Sure, man. Sounds good. Hit me.
So what are your current favorite games? Like what kind of games are you playing now that are really the your go-tos?
Oh boy. I wish I was playing more games. I'll say first. There's so many games that are on my list and I am constantly saying that it's on my list, but I haven't gotten around to playing them. I'm curious about 12 minutes. I know that just came out. I've been playing um I played Death's Door recently. I haven't beaten it yet, but I am enjoying that a lot. And it's definitely uh, it hits a lot of the right buttons for me in terms of simple to learn, somewhat challenging to master. I guess it's not. I wouldn't say it's too difficult of a game, but I think it's like just the right level of challenge in certain spots that it keeps me on my toes here and there. But I love the world aesthetically. It's gorgeous. It's engaging and interesting and charming. There, secrets abound. The bosses are all creative and clever. It's got like that perfect mix of sort of the Zelda slash Souls formula that everybody's eating up these days, but including myself. So yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that. Um, I still return to Nuclear Throne here and there. It's such like a staple in my gaming repertoire. I just love everything about it. I managed to get my hands on a PS5 a few weeks ago, finally. So even though I haven't invested too much time yet, I'm really enjoying what I've played of Returnal. I was surprised by how much I like that game because it has that roguelike, that quick restart loop that makes just jumping in and out a lot of fun and painless. Dying doesn't really feel like it, it's a huge chore. And then the loading times on PS5 are so good that like it doesn't even matter when you hit that restart button. You're just right back into the action. And then as far as upcoming games, needless to say, I'm very excited for Elden Ring coming out in January.
Oh wow, I did not know it was that soon.
Yep. Very
Oh wow.
exciting.
So yeah, so I imagine, based on everything we've discussed, that game is kind of filling every box and then some for you. Uh,
Yes.
and from what I've seen of it, it seems like it's going to be a little bit of a change of pace. I haven't looked into it too much, so I can't speak to being incredibly knowledgeable on what's been said or shown. But it looks like it's going to be actually a nice change of pace with a bit of an open world system that hopefully, is able to pull it off and not have a world that feels empty and uninteresting, if that makes
Right.
sense. I think an interesting but empty world is acceptable,
Mhm.
in a weird way to say. Uh, but hopefully they're able to pull that off because the worlds for all the other Souls like or the From Software games that I've played or looked at always have such um, rich levels, rich lore that's just kind of everything is basically just bleeding that lore. It's bleeding the atmosphere and everything. So hopefully that's something they're able to keep with the transition to open world. I think that's where I was trying to go with that and stumbling a little too much.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think you hit the nail on the head in that From Software is definitely great at creating intentional, purposeful worlds. Everything at some point, like I bet you every rock has a reason for being where it is in those games. Like Miyazaki or just the design team and the art team are just so good at least making you think they've thought of everything and the reason that everything is where it is and just the history behind it. Like, this little pile of rocks is here because some giant walked up the top of a cliff above and, stumbled and dropped his sandal, which you can still find up at the top of the hill if you go up there with like moss all over it. It's like just every little thing feels like it's been thought out and is intentional, and that's what I love about this game. So yeah, I think you're right. I'm, you know, a lot of games that are open world can feel like they're a bit uh, dev- uh, uh, devoid of, I guess, intention. Just here, paint a bunch of random trees and rocks everywhere and travel, from point A to point B. But I don't think Front Software has that problem. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, and like I said, so am I, because you nailed it on the head that everything that they do seems to feel intentional, or at least it gives the illusion of being intentional and
Right.
allows them to say, "Oh yeah, yeah, definitely, that's what we intended." Um, which
Right.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing to
I'm
have
sure
the
that
illusion
happens.
for it.
I'm sure that happens more often than not with them, though. It's like they just let the internet go crazy with theory crafting, and they never deny anything. They just say, "Yep, that's what we were tending to do. That's totally correct," and the lore just kind of builds upon itself.
And I think for a game, like Dark Souls or Demon Souls or what have you, I think that's more than acceptable just because if you are allowing or creating that situation where people can collectively piece things together and have very viable theories, I don't think it's a bad thing to just go, yeah, sure, that's exactly what we wanted to do.
No.
Um, because like nothing against narrative designers or any of that, but there has to be some point where you're putting all sorts of stuff out there and you forget to connect that dot, and if other people make a very viable one, to just go, yeah, okay, that makes sense,
Uh huh.
cool, thank you, you did some work for me, and everyone loves it, right?
Yep. You got to know when to keep your mouth shut sometimes.
Definitely, yes, yes, I've learned that the hard way a few times, and in my case, I actually learned just to not care when I say things I shouldn't, and just
Right.
worry about the consequences later. But
There you go.
some other people might not be as lucky or foolish, idiotic as I am in that regard.
Or smart.
Oh, in my case, yes, yeah. In some people, in my case, it's mostly just dumb luck that I
Oh no.
have survived as long as I have for certain things.
You just got good luck.
So, Sandy, like I said, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. However, if there's anything else you want to discuss, a cool game that you want people to know of that we might not have touched on, what
Oh.
you're doing, something you just feel more people need to be aware of. And, that can really be, anything really. That's, kind of like if you want to jump on a soapbox, by all means. You want to tell someone about your favorite cooking dish, what have you, the floor is yours. As well, please let everyone know where they can find more information about you, because I'll also include that in the episode description. But I want to make it easy for people, so that way, if they want to know more about you, they can do that.
Hey, sure. Well, I don't have any soapbox that I want to stand on or anything that I'm looking to promote per se. I did say earlier that we've got a yacht club. We've got Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon on the horizon, as well as Shovel Knight Dig coming out hopefully next year. I'm very excited for both of those games, and you can find trailers for both of them on YouTube or on our website. Um, as far as other upcoming things, I am pretty excited about a game called Crowsworn, which had a Kickstarter that just ended. I believe it was last week. I'm friends with the developers, and so far the hype around the game has been pretty impressive. The game looks beautiful. The artists and design team are just doing a bang up job. It's looking so good. So I'm excited for that. So I'll give that a little shout out. And otherwise, yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Bandygrass, BANDYGRASS. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any comments or questions for me or just want to talk games or anything else. And yeah, that's about it for me. Unless you have any other questions, Link.
Well, there's definitely a lot of other questions I'd love to ask. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I also want to throw out there just, I don't know if you intentionally didn't mention it. But I also want to throw out you do have you do animation tutorials that, I've seen a few of them that have popped up every now and then on like Reddit or what have you.
Yeah.
So, I think that's a great thing as well that people should be aware of that you have available, because, it's anything that that is going to help people get better at it or just be more aware of things, I think is great to mention.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, to my own detriment, I haven't done any new tutorials in quite a while. Even though I really would like to, I have a lot of ideas. So maybe at some point in the future, I'll be able to add more content. But the ones that I did do a while back are still up there. Got things like how to do a run cycle, a pixel art run cycle, walk cycle, attack animations, adding expression to different movement cycles and things like that. So yeah, if you're interested, if you're looking to get into pixel art, then hopefully those help.
And hopefully that, anyone that is looking, they'll go looking for them, or I'll link them and they can click through and learn more about certain things, because like I said, I've always loved seeing them even when I'm not capable of doing those things or able to.
Well, that's why they're there. You got to just follow those, and then you'll be able to link.
But thank you for the encouragement, but
Vote of confidence.
I always love seeing the mindset that's put into it. Because, like I said at the beginning, I've always had awe and respect for people like you that do pixel art, that do animation, and all that. Just because it's something that I've fundamentally struggled to really wrap my head around. And I love being able to look at that and see it broken down. Maybe not frame by frame, but at least like or like a frame of, I don't know the right terminology for this. So I'm just gonna go back to saying a frame by frame or step by step, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Frame by frame makes perfect sense.
But yeah, so Sandy, thank you again so much. And if there isn't anything else, I will let you get back to your day.
All right. Well, thanks for again for having me, Link. It was a lot of fun to talk to you, and maybe we can do it again some point down the road.
Definitely, if you want to come back and talk to me, I will not say no to that in the future.
All right, man. Well, I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You as well. And thanks again to our guest, Sandy Gordon, for making time to have this conversation with me. And thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for the use of music from the title track from Road Steep. And if you like this podcast and want to support it and help it grow, please subscribe or follow me on Twitter at Red Tunic Podcast to receive the latest episodes and news. And be sure to share it with those you think might enjoy it. Thanks, and until next time.